Good evening, Bravo Knights, Bravo family, and community at large. I am Dr. Lopez, principal of Bravo Medical Magnet High School, home of the Knights, and welcome to our second edition of the Good Night podcast. This is a space where I interview student leaders at our school who have seen a need, who have seen a barrier, and they have created a solution by forming a club. And I give them a space to talk about what it is that they have seen at our school that needs to be addressed and why their club addresses or how their club addresses that need. But also it's an opportunity to discuss connections to other things that we could potentially do here at our school and that could potentially help other schools, other students in our country. So welcome again to our second edition of the Good Night podcast. And today I will be interviewing the two leaders of our Healthy Minds Club. We are a medical magnet high school, and these two leaders have taken the leadership role in the Healthy Minds Club. And our president is Elijah Cheng, and our vice president is Lisbeth Tejada. So I'll be talking to them about what it is that they saw at Bravo, what it is that you saw at Bravo that you felt you needed to have a club like the Healthy Minds Club.
Well, that's a great question, but it's not just exactly Bravo, but I will point out that Bravo definitely does need, mental health awareness. I mean, obviously we are fortunate enough to have some, therapists or counselors, to always be there and listen for certain struggles. But on a wider note, not just within Bravo, after the pandemic recently, I think a lot of people have mental health issues, and or at least they're just not heard, right? I think that brought a lot of awareness, but not so much an impact, right? We still see some struggles. I mean, not just in workload, but also dealing with that workload, which can put a heavy strain on mental health. And I do believe that it was necessary because not just to bring awareness, but so that some people could have a space to come and learn about how to treat themselves well, but also to let it out and to hopefully impact their performance in like school.
Great.
Going back, Bravo is known to be like a competitive school. There is this atmosphere where a lot of people feel like they have to be very competitive against other students, and I think the club also helps create again a space where they don't have to worry about doing so good in their academics, like having to compete against everyone, and they just get to relax and meet some new people and have fun with them.
Great. As a principal, and I think I shared this with in my previous interview with another club, that I have seen an increase in students reporting mental health problems, and some of them are very mild, and some of them are a little bit more extreme, things that need to be treated. Um, do you think that we are, in general, as a system, the school included, the community, the city, the nation, do you think that we are responding to those issues appropriately, fast enough, well enough? Or do you think that we need to do more to help students and all others who are facing mental health issues?
To answer that question, I think that's a very good question for of course we're trying to raise awareness not just at Bravo, but nationwide. I do think that there are some measures that Bravo has specifically taken in terms of counselors, and also Mental Awareness Month is actually coming up within May. So hopefully we can capitalize on that and maybe make an impact there. But I do want to point out that while we do have measures to help, not everybody takes those measures because it's not exactly encouraged. We may put out that, hey, it'd be great for you to come. It'd be great for you to speak to us, participate in and this event. And while there's an incentive to do that, not everybody's comfortable with that, right? I mean, obviously we know the difference between extroverted, ambiverted, and introverted people.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe perhaps extroverted people are suffering and they have the social capability to capitalize on those opportunities. But for those introverts that are often alone, quiet, and secluded, they might be facing the same or worse issues to extroverted people and won't be able to take advantage of those measures that Bravo has placed. So I do think that there's a bunch of ideas that could be implemented to improve this, but as it stands right now, I don't think enough people take advantage of it.
I think another thing also, going back to how not everyone feels comfortable, I think teachers can also help with this. They can go out of their way and try to get closer to students and seeing, like they can see like in the grade, like if the grade drops, trying to go take that um, the position, like maybe reach out to them instead of just it being like, oh, if you're going through something, you have to reach out. Just like I guess being more aware of the students, people like in the school. If you see something, try to like reach out to them. I think that would help.
Thank you. You know, I think one of the things that I encounter when trying to intervene or provide assistance and support and dealing even with my own mental health issues, right, um, is this stigma that surrounds mental health. The idea that there's something wrong with you and that it's not okay, right? And I think it's more present in the adults than younger generations. How do we help our parents um, uh, recognize that there is a need and that they have some influence and power and authority to be able to help their children with mental health issues?
Yeah, I definitely think stigma is a very big problem. Like people think they see people going through stuff and they even go out of the way saying like, oh, like they're not out in their right mind or things. But I think it's like very like old ways of thinking. I think I'd say like something that could be done, maybe having workshops to bring more awareness to this, because parents, like I said, like it's an old way of thinking. We have a lot of people like who are like come from different like countries and have different like beliefs. I think yeah, just trying to like do things to bring more awareness and like teach the parents that to be more inviting to their child to like, make them feel more comfortable to going to them and speaking about what they're going through.
So before I give my answer, do you mind if I ask you, as obviously one of the older generation, what are your thoughts? Obviously, you brought up there's a stigma, but obviously, if we're trying to impact other parents, right, lead by example, what would you say to somebody that to some students' parents that might have say, well, what do you think? Since you're also perhaps a parent or an older person yourself, like what are your thoughts and how would you like persuade them?
I think I would try to engage them in a conversation about it and try to do away with the fear. There's not only the stigma, but it's fear, right? That you will be branded a failure as a parent. Many times as parents, we think that when our children are struggling, that we are failures, that we didn't do our job appropriately. And so try to engage parents to understand that these are situations that they have no control over and that they could not have predicted, that there's no guilt. There shouldn't be any guilt assigned to anyone, not the child, not the person dealing with the mental health, or not the family, but that everyone can have a place and a time to help the person deal with the mental health, right? Everyone can be part of the solution, but no one should be placed with a blame. I think that's one of the things that I would try to do. And this is why I was so interested in interviewing you guys, because part of having a conversation like this and knowing that there is a group of students in our school who are trying to do something about it is doing away with that stigma. Having those conversations and just having a healthy minds club is doing away with the stigma that there's something wrong with me, right? There's nothing wrong with you. You're just dealing with something that maybe somebody else is not, but it's not the end of the story. Um, that's the biggest message that I would. And I'll be frank with you. I don't want this interview to be about me, but I am a parent, and I've had to deal with that issue with one of my kids, and it was very scary. It was very scary. It was very. It was almost like you feel shame, you feel guilt, you feel fear, you feel frustration, hopelessness. Um, and all those are very real, and they need to be recognized and dealt with. And sometimes just having someone to talk to helps and be open about it, right? So thank you for creating this space for us. I think that's a good beginning. That's my thought. I don't want it to be about me. I want it to be about you, your idea, and your leadership.
Oh no, that's a great. I just wanted to ask because obviously, I do think that if we are open to open workshops, like Lizbeth said, at this school, I think obviously you as the principal is a very strong role model for these parents coming in or just anybody. I think obviously, you hold a lot of power and respect from people. So I think hearing your story and hearing your experience and what you would do to encourage them is obviously something that's needed, not just because of this episode. We don't, well, of course, in a way that was making about you, but I think it's very important, right? Because lead by example. When I said that is because everybody has some fear, like you mentioned. Not everybody wants to go out there and take that shot because what if they fail, right? Obviously, you mentioned guilt, you mentioned fear, and those are two of the strongest things in anybody's mind at times when they're struggling. But as for what I think that um, we could do to improve or like reach out to parents, as somebody who's has a minority parent as well, that while one is very supportive of mental health, of course, there's two parents and one might not be so supportive. And like you mentioned, there's the fear of being a failure as a parent, but it's also because I think it's also just cultural. It's also could be possibly religious background that is very pushback on the idea of mental health. But at the end of the day, I think everybody needs a healthy mind. It all starts in here when we go out to do work, we go out to school. In anything we do, this is the most important. And if we can't influence these parents, will never reach out to these kids. And obviously, these kids are the next generation. And if they can't have a healthy mind, who knows how it's going to repeat? You know, um, the past often repeats itself. And if we continue to let these parents, not that they're wrong, but obviously, this mental health is such a great issue. If we let it sit, who knows how it's going to become greater later on.
So, what are some of the things that you do individually to improve your health uh, uh, and to help others improve their health and to stay healthy mentally and emotionally?
I think for me personally, what helps is my relationship with my friends. I think having like a group where you feel comfortable and close to others helps because you can confide in people. As to helping others, it's a difficult thing because I can understand like fearing, like not wanting to speak about your personal problems. I understand that that fear of like why would people care about like what I'm going through, and maybe just doing a better emphasis on like portraying that staff do care, like they really want to help students and just so that they can feel more comfortable and not feel selfish just for talking about like what like themselves. I think.
Do you mind repeating that question for me one more time just so I can have a clear answer for you?
Yeah, so what are some of the things you do as a person to improve your health mentally and emotionally, and what are some things that others can do to replicate that and improve their own health and mental? Yeah.
That's a great question. I think often mental health or mental illnesses are derived of what we let ourselves think. Sometimes your mind is your own greatest enemy. As in, society, places, or even just classmates, sometimes teachers. Well, rarely teachers, but obviously every school has a social system, whether it be ranging from just your class or to your entire grade level. Obviously, everybody might have a stigma about a person, and it depends how much they let that affect them. So I think for me personally, while it might not be the best way, I do think that other ways such as, trying to build relationships and reaching out to friend groups and also, um, you know, I think also going to see therapists. I mean, taking advantage of what I mentioned earlier with counselors at this school. But personally, I think if you can, obviously, I had the pleasure of speaking to actually one of my teachers last year, and he said, if what you do isn't meant to hurt people, then why do you let it hurt yourself? Because sometimes, like I mentioned earlier, we can be our own greatest enemies. And if we had no intention of doing something that hurts someone else, or maybe sometimes we're just not likable, personally, you can't let that affect you. I mean, introverted people are often labeled. Actually, I was an introvert, I think, my entire life. So me having the courage to speak to you on this level has been a big growth for me. But I think introverts have the biggest, from how I grew, it was just like you have to learn to deal with this stigma that, or this sense in you that you're guilty of something when you're not.
Hmm.
So I think obviously people should practice that, perhaps just self care and having that confidence in yourself that what I'm doing is trying to make a better impact anywhere I go, then I can live with myself, right? But I do think that not just that, but having groups is the best way to go. Having someone you can confide in, whether it be a friend or a therapist or a parent or a family member, can go a long way. Just in the sense that that 15-minute conversation, just for them to listen to your problems is really relieving in that fact. And fortunately, I've had the pleasure of, having a few people step in my life the last 1 or 2 years that have listened to my problems. Actually, like I mentioned earlier, a teacher listened to my problems, and look how far that's gotten me, right? So I definitely think that just taking that chance and maybe listening to somebody can go a long way.
Just to add in a bit more, I think something else that can help with one's mental health, I think a lot of stress can also occur, as well as like stress put on by like oneself. I like going back to a competitive atmosphere. I think like personally, I always try to push myself, and I know others also try to push themselves hard to become like this great student, as well as pressure put on by their parents. And I know the feeling of like having a slip in one's grades, and I know how that can make you feel. Like it makes you feel like you're not the best, like I guess, student. You're like not fulfilling your part as like a child. But I think just like going back, like not putting that blame on yourself, as well as like knowing that you're trying your best, and just making that make yourself feel better, goes a long way. Just not blaming yourself, and like taking breaks in order to not make sure you don't burn out.
Great. I've heard many great ideas, and I've heard that relationships, positive relationships, are important. Communication, talking about what you're going through with someone that you can confide with, those relationships. I've heard that you need to work on your self-image, right? You need to work on your self-image and really reflect about who you are and how you can get better. And maybe even think about the things that you've already done well and how good of a person you are, and that you don't need to challenge who you are, that you are good. And that things that we face and sometimes we are not successful about do not define us. So if you didn't get the grade that you wanted, that doesn't mean that you're a bad student or a bad person. It just means that you had a circumstance, and whatever the reason it may be, you didn't get that grade, right? But that doesn't define you as a good person or a bad person. Those are all great ideas, and um, I think that those are things that can be taught and going and reviewed with other students, and that they can use those skills, self-management, time management, giving yourself a break, finding, right, managing your stress. If you're overworked, manage your stress, take a break. You'll get it done later, right? Work on your self-image, positive relationships. Great ideas.
But just to add on to that, I think you mentioned the grades. Obviously, grades are our biggest thing at Bravo, but also I just want to reach out to also the fact that we have many sports teams that are also very successful. But sometimes, it can be hard, not just in grades, but also in sports. It just might not be your day. And obviously, to all those people that may be like, oh, if I raise myself up, I might be a little bit selfish, or I might be a little bit cocky. But it's better. That's better than letting yourself get beat down, right? Because if you get beat down, you can't get back up again. And I think that's the biggest thing of mental illness, is that we sometimes let it happen because of what we're afraid to do. Obviously, in things like depression or anxiety or maybe even more severe illnesses, um, people are often scared of failure. I think that's the biggest thing for everybody is scared of failure. But I think I think just really trying to be compassionate and empathetic to yourself is the biggest thing, because as a person that has, I'm graduating this year, there's been a lot of ups and downs with grades, and also I used to do sports and also music. And sometimes you're gonna have those days where it just doesn't flow for you. I mean, life isn't meant to be easy. If it is easy, you might be doing something wrong, because it's always gonna throw challenges at you every
Hmm.
day,
Hmm.
every second of your lifespan. But it's how you respond to that that keeps you mentally well. Because as long as you just have self confidence, whatever grade you get, however well you did on your team that day, you can't let anybody else define you other than yourself, I think. And I don't want people to let a grade or a number or, a loss or a win define you. I think that's the biggest thing.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. I don't think failures should be called failures, right? They should be called something else. Those are like tryouts. You tried it didn't work, let's move on. Let's do something different, right? Failure has such a negative connotation, and I think that's just part of our culture. But I do think that they don't define us. The way like you said, the way we deal with them, how we respond to those um, times when we don't succeed is how who we are really. Do we continue going, or do we just give up and freeze, right? And sometimes it's important to take breaks. Sometimes that's what we need to do, and if that's what we need to do, we need to do it.
And yeah, and I think going back to like failures, instead of seeing them as failures, instead of seeing them as like stepping stones, like it's a phase in your life. You overcome it, and it helps bring out the best in you for like the future.
That's right. That is correct.
Sorry, I just want to add on to that because I was thinking of this quote, but I kind of lost it in the moment. But it's, you don't learn from your successes, you learn from your failures. I think many great athletes, I think I'm not completely 100% sure, but even Michael Jordan said, I might have made a ton of shots, but I also missed a ton of shots.
Hmm.
So it's taking those chances and failing. You can't let that be down on you, and you're only going to live life and get better through failures, I believe.
Yeah. And I'm going to connect back to your comment about being an introvert. I have been an introvert all my life, and I think I struggle with that. And I told some students at another school some time ago, I said, "Yeah, I'm just an introvert." And their response was, you can't be a principal and be an introvert. And you absolutely can. You just find a way to communicate that's a little bit different. But we are who we are, and it's okay. It's okay to be an introvert. It's good to be an introvert. It's good to be an extrovert. It's good. Sometimes we're extroverts, sometimes we're introverts. It depends, right? And the more we learn about who we are, the more we learn to manage all of that stuff. And so, what message do you think you want to give to our Bravo community and the community at large?
Okay. Well, I just want to capitalize on your point. You and I, we're extroverts with social skills. We're not exactly extroverted, but we have that ability to speak. But I think the message I want to send out is that, um, as a someone who's young and I'm not completely accepted in my own grade, because I think you need to, how do I put this in words? You need to have the greatest confidence in yourself, and you just need to go out and every day. Actually, this is a quote my parents shared me, but it's every day when I go out there, I try to be better than my last day. Because if you continue to do that, by the end of your lifetime, you'll feel fulfilled, and you'll know that I've tried my hardest. And I think the biggest thing in mental illness is that, like I said before and many times, it's what we let ourselves think, and we can't let it hurt ourselves. And I do think that while it's important to focus on our own mental health as well, but sometimes going out of our way to speak to somebody who we can see might not be in the greatest of moods, perhaps offering somebody something they might want, I think is a lot more valuable and a lot very fulfilling. I think sometimes you can even just have a healthier mind knowing that, hey, I did something nice today. Or maybe I went out and said hello to somebody when they were not, when they were alone. Or I went out and I gave somebody something that they wanted. If they need a pen, they need paper, they need food or something,
Hmm.
right? So I think not just for ourselves to have the most self-confidence, but also to go out there and make an impact on little things that we can do for other people.
I think something I try to live by is like everything occurs for a reason. It connects to like the idea that like when one door closes, like find a window, like another door opens. I think like you might not have gotten what you wanted. Like for example, like as seniors, like you might not have gotten acceptance like the college you wanted, but maybe you have another great opportunity. I think just like looking at the brighter aspects of it instead of focusing so much in the negative, like, oh, like I wasn't good enough to get into this, but more seeing like, okay, what can I do in this new school to help me um, in the future? Like, how can I use it as a stepping stool?
Thank you, Elijah, and thank you, Lisbeth. When I talk to teachers, one of the things I tell them is we need to think. We call it um, asset-based thinking. We need to think of and focus on the assets and build on the assets that we have, right? Not on the deficits that we have, not on the things that we lack. Don't focus on that. Focus on the things that we already have and build on those. And I talk to teachers a lot about that when planning lessons, when planning units, when talking to you guys. So we do a lot of discussion with teachers about that. Hopefully that translates to their interest. I know that it does because you guys have mentioned that teachers have interacted with you in a positive way, and I know that they have with you too. So um, it's very intentional. We talk about this all the time. Thank you, President Elijah and Vice President Lisbeth. This has been another edition of the Good Night Podcast. And you can find us on YouTube and Instagram. We'll go over the handles. But thank you again. We've reviewed today mental health, our healthy minds. And just as in the other podcast, in the first podcast, we probably will have some ideas and activities for the Bravo community so that we can implement and promote as much as possible for everyone healthy minds. I like the idea of doing an act of kindness, and maybe we can promote that somehow and have a day of to start the mental health month. Let's start it with an act of kindness day, and that could be something that takes that takes over and that could help more people than we think. Thank you, Elijah, again, and thank you, Elizabeth. And have a good night. This has been the Good Night Podcast.